The delicate ring of a crystal flute piercing the silence wasn't caused by a drop. It shattered not on the marble floor, but against the tension in the air. The sharp tap of silver against glass echoed like a shot fired, slicing through the polite murmur of the crowd in the grand ballroom. It was the kind of sound that made you sit up straighter without knowing why. Because it meant Eleanor Wren had something to say. And when Eleanor spoke, even in whispers, New York's elite listened. 300 guests at the Langston Hall froze mid-sip and turned toward the source, each face taut with anticipation. I was at the bride's family table, hands clenched so tightly in my lap my knuckles had turned pale and stiff like antique porcelain. Across the room, my daughter, Lena, stood beside her new husband, Darren. She looked like a figure sculpted out of sugar and silence. Her smile twitched at the corners, brittle as spun glass, her gaze flickering toward me. Darren didn't look at her. Of course not. His eyes were locked on his mother. Eleanor, in a floor-length sheath of silver that shimmered like cold moonlight, slowly rose to her feet. She held a box, elegantly wrapped in deep navy paper with velvet ribbon. Everything about her was refined, calculated, dangerous. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. The room hushed. You could hear the clink of a fork falling somewhere in the distance. My dearest Lena, Eleanor's voice poured out, smooth and cold like winter rain, welcome to the Wren family. We hold our legacy close, our expectations closer. She turned the box in her hands, fingers adorned with diamonds that sparkled like ice. And given your rather modest upbringing, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, I thought it wise to help you adjust to your new responsibilities. She handed Lena the box. Lena's fingers trembled as she untied the velvet ribbon. I wanted to leap across the room, to stop her. But I couldn't move. My heels were cemented to the polished floor. The lid came off, and I heard the gasp before I saw it. A gray janitorial uniform. A scrub brush. The kind of thing worn by the staff scrubbing bathrooms in the basement of a hotel like this. To remind you, Eleanor said with that terrifying smile, that a wife's most sacred duty is to serve. A smattering of brittle laughter followed. Not genuine. The kind that people use when they're too afraid not to laugh. Darren chuckled too. Perfect, mother, he said, placing a hand on Lena's shoulder like he was steadying a nervous dog. She'll put it to good use. Lena stood frozen, holding that hideous uniform against her delicate Vera Wang gown. A gray smear on a white dream. Her eyes searched for mine, pleading. And that's when something inside me moved. Not rage. No. Something colder. Older. Protective. I stood. The scrape of my chair dragged across the wooden floor like a blade unsheathed. The heads turned. Eleanor raised an arched brow, her expression amused. Patronizing. I walked forward. Each step deliberate. Controlled. Like I had trained for this moment my entire life. An interesting gift, Eleanor, I said calmly, my voice even, too even. It felt like glass in my throat. I opened my small silver clutch. If we're giving practical gifts tonight, then I have one for my daughter too. I stepped between Lena and Darren. I didn't look at Eleanor anymore. I didn't need to. I looked at Darren. And I didn't blink. I placed a folded legal document in Lena's hands, right on top of the gray uniform. Open it, sweetheart, I whispered. Go ahead. Lena unfolded the paper, her brow furrowed. Then she read aloud, slowly, voice trembling but building. Deed of trust. Property at 84, Juniper Lane, Hudson Pines. Sole owner, Lena Marie Hart. The room shifted. A new silence bloomed, sharper, heavier. Darren yanked the paper from her hands, eyes scanning. You bought her a house? His laugh was sharp, disbelieving. With what money? And why didn't anyone ask me? It's a cottage, I replied. It needs work, but it's fully paid for. And if you flip to page 2, you'll see it's in a spendthrift trust. Ironclad. Untouchable. It cannot be sold. Not by you. Not by anyone. It is hers, and hers alone. Eleanor's smile slipped. This is offensive, she snapped. You're suggesting my son can't provide? No, I said, my voice harder now. I'm suggesting that if he ever chooses not to, she won't be left begging. And then I turned to Lena. That house is yours. Not for decoration, not for prestige, but so that you are never ever without a place of your own. You wear that gown today because you're a bride, not a maid. And if anyone forgets that, they don't deserve you. I kissed her cheek, walked back to my seat. The room watched in stunned silence, as if a storm had passed, but the lightning hadn't struck yet. That was the moment I knew. The war hadn't ended. It had only just begun. But you'll never believe what Darren did next. The real storm didn't hit until they came back from their honeymoon, and what happened after that nearly broke us all. They returned from their honeymoon 2 weeks later. From the glowing photos on social media, private beaches in Seychelles, infinity pools, helicopter rides, it looked like a dream. The perfect start to a golden life. But I knew how those smiles felt when they didn't reach the eyes. I had seen them on Lena's face too many times to count. When she called me, her voice was stretched thin. Not broken, yet, but strained, like a violin string pulled too tight. Mom, we're back. Can we meet for coffee? She said. Of course. I cleared my schedule. We met at a cafe tucked between office buildings near her job, the kind of place where people talked fast and stirred their coffee faster. She was still working at the publishing house, still editing manuscripts and dreaming of writing her own one day. But when she walked in, I noticed the change immediately. Gone were the vibrant earrings I'd given her on her birthday, the vintage pearls she adored. In their place, tiny diamonds, impersonal, corporate. Her hair was pulled back tight, too tight. Her smile was there, but her eyes. Empty isn't the right word. More like muted. We sat. She didn't order anything, just wrapped her fingers around the edge of the table like she needed it to hold her up. He wants to sell the cottage, she said quietly, eyes flicking down. The one in Hudson Pines? I asked, though I already knew. He says it's an insult, she whispered. That it makes him look like I don't trust him, like I'm planning an escape. I stared at her, heart thudding. It is your escape. If you need it. He said married couples shouldn't keep secrets, she continued. That we should consolidate our assets. That we could use the money for his new fund. That if I loved him, really loved him, I'd sign the trust over to him. She looked up, and in her eyes, I saw something that made my stomach turn. Shame. As if she had done something wrong. Oh, sweetheart, I said, reaching for her hand. That house is not a betrayal. It's a lifeline. But he says you are manipulating me. That you're jealous of his family's wealth. That you want to ruin my marriage. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I forced my voice to stay calm. And what do you think? Lena looked away. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know anymore. We sat in silence. He was getting to her, twisting her. Subtle, clever, the way controlling men often are. You're not crazy, I said finally. And you're not selfish. You don't owe him your safety. That house was never about him. It's about you not needing permission to breathe. She nodded faintly, then whispered, he started planning weekend trips. Last-minute things. Always when we're supposed to meet. He books dinners on nights I have plans with friends. And he gets so hurt when I cancel. I felt rage simmer behind my ribs. He's isolating you. She gave a short, humorless laugh. I told him I was seeing you today, and he said, "Tell your mom hello from the man she couldn't control." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. He doesn't need your love. He wants your obedience. There's a difference. But she just sat there, twisting her wedding ring, and I knew the real battle hadn't even started yet. That came 3 months later. One rainy Tuesday night in January, I opened the door to find Lena standing on my stoop. Soaked, pregnant, shaking. She said it in a flat voice, barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." And then, without warning, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing so hard I could barely hold her upright. "I was happy," she choked. "I told him last night." And for a moment he smiled. He opened a bottle of wine to celebrate. She laughed, and it broke into a weeping cough. Then he told me his plan. I sat her on the couch, wrapped her in my thickest throw blanket, heart pounding. "What plan, sweetheart?" She looked up, mascara streaking down her face. "He wants me to quit my job. Says it's too stressful for the baby. Says being a mother is my full-time job now. And he wants me to sell the cottage." "No. He already found a buyer. A developer. He says it's too far away, too symbolic, that it makes him look like I'm planning for failure. He said..." She broke again, tears pouring down. "He said if I don't sign the paperwork, he'll make sure I lose custody if we ever split. That he'll prove I'm unstable. He said his lawyers would bury me." I froze. Not with fear, but with certainty. This man was prepared for war. And now so was I. "You listen to me, Lena," I said, my voice low. "You do not quit your job. You do not touch that trust. That house is your shield. He's trying to cut off your escape route. Don't let him." "He says I'm ungrateful," she whispered. "That he's trying to build a future for us. That my mother is stuck in the past." "Well," I said, brushing hair from her damp cheek, "your mother survived the past. And she's making sure you survive the future." I held her all night. We didn't sleep. At dawn, I made her tea, packed her leftovers, and sent her back, not because I trusted him, but because we needed time. Time to prepare. I told her to lie. To say she'd quit after the baby was born. To pretend the trust had a 2-year lockout clause. Anything to delay. I needed to watch. To plan. To strike. But weeks passed. Then months. And Lena disappeared. Until the night I got a phone call that changed everything. 3 seconds. One broken whisper. And a single word that told me everything I needed to know. Help. The call came at 2:11 a.m. 3 seconds. One word. Mom. Hudson, key under the loose brick. Help. And then, nothing. The line went dead. I didn't stop to think. I didn't breathe. I didn't cry. I moved. I called my brother. "Frank," I said, already grabbing my coat. "Bring your truck. And the crowbar." Frank is the kind of man who doesn't ask questions when it counts. He's built like a refrigerator in a flannel shirt. Retired carpenter, veteran, heart of gold and fists that VE broken more than a few fences in his time. He hated Darren the moment he met him. We drove through freezing March rain, headlights bouncing off the winding roads to Hudson Pines. The world was dark, the kind of dark that settles in your chest. I didn't feel the cold. I didn't feel the fear. I just saw her face. That quiet whisper. Help. We didn't go to the penthouse in Manhattan. Lena hadn't said city. She said Hudson. That meant the cottage. That meant he brought her there. It was isolated. No neighbors. No doormen. No eyes. Perfect for breaking someone quietly. We pulled up just before dawn. There it was. The white Victorian I had restored with my own hands. Her sanctuary. Her last line of defense. And now, it looked like a prison. All the windows were dark. But Darren's sleek black SUV was in the driveway, parked like a predator. Frank cut the engine. "Stay here," he said, grabbing the crowbar. "I'm not staying anywhere," I snapped. "That's my child in there." We circled the house. The front door locked. I checked the loose brick in the garden wall, the one where I used to hide the spare key during renovations. Gone. Of course he found it. Then I saw it. A flicker of soft orange light, barely visible through the upstairs window. A candle. No power, I whispered. He shut off the electricity. Frank and I locked eyes. He wrapped his jacket around his arm and smashed the glass panel of the kitchen door. The sound was barely audible under the wind. We slipped in. The house was ice cold. Colder than outside. No lights. No heat. Silent. "Lena!" I screamed, running up the stairs. Mom!" A faint cry. The master bedroom. I reached the door. Locked. No, not just locked. Bolted. From the outside. A heavy metal slide bolt had been screwed into the hallway door frame, like you'd use for an animal cage. My stomach flipped. My hands started to shake, not from fear, but from fury so deep it burned my fingertips. Frank didn't hesitate. He threw his full weight against the door once, twice. On the third hit, it cracked and crashed open. And there she was. My baby girl. Curled in the corner, wrapped in a duvet, skin pale, hair limp, a candle burning low beside her. She looked up at me, eyes wide, hollow. And then she ran into my arms, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. "Mom, he left 2 days ago. He said he wouldn't come back until I signed. There's no heat, no food." I didn't know what to do. She clung to me like a drowning girl clinging to driftwood. She smelled of cold and dust and desperation. Then we heard it. A voice. Well, well. Isn't this a touching little reunion? We both turned. Darren stood in the broken doorway, coffee cup in hand, coat dry, expression smug. His eyes were bright with something worse than anger, amusement. He had been here the whole time, sleeping in the guest cottage, waiting, watching. "You're trespassing," he said coolly to Frank. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers." "You locked my pregnant daughter in a freezing room," I said, my voice flat. "That's not a civil matter. That's criminal." "She was hysterical," he said, waving it off. "I did what I had to do. I was giving her space. We're married, remember? She belongs with me." Frank stepped forward. No words. Just presence. A 6-foot wall of righteous fury holding a crowbar like it weighed nothing. Darren's eyes flickered. He took a half step back. And just like that, the mask slipped. The boy behind the money peeked through. "I'm taking her," I said. "Now." "She's not going anywhere with my child inside her," he growled, stepping forward. Frank shifted the crowbar slightly. Not a threat. A warning. Darren stopped. Something in his jaw twitched. And then, "Fine," he spat. "She's useless to me like this anyway. But don't think this is over. You'll both be ruined. My lawyers will bury you. You'll be picking up trash for a living by the time I'm done." I looked him dead in the eyes. "Save your money, Darren. You're going to need it for your criminal defense attorney." We got Lena to the hospital. She was dehydrated, cold, traumatized. But the baby, thank God, the baby was okay. The doctors documented everything. The bruises on her wrists, the vitamin deficiency, the psychological toll. And this time, the police listened. We got a restraining order within 24 hours. And the divorce, it was no longer a legal proceeding. It was a war. You won't believe what his mother did next. Eleanor Wren took the stand, and what she said in that courtroom, it nearly turned the entire case on its head. If the hospital was the beginning of Lena's rescue, the courtroom was where we fought to make it permanent. Darren didn't go down easily. His family, wealthy, practiced in arrogance, and armed with more attorneys than Lena had friends, unleashed every dirty trick in the book. They tried to invalidate the trust. They tried to argue Lena was mentally unfit to manage property. They said she'd orchestrated the whole thing, weaponized victimhood, they called it. But they underestimated two things. First, the ironclad trust I'd had drafted by a partner at the firm I worked for, a man who wore sharkskin suits and won every case he touched. The kind of man who hated rich boys who thought they were above the law. That trust held in court like it was carved from stone. Second, they underestimated me. A 58-year-old widow from a Queens apartment who had spent the last 20 years helping other women navigate legal paperwork and power games. They brought fire. I brought fuel. But it was Eleanor Wren's testimony that turned the tide. She walked into that courtroom dressed like she was attending a royal wedding, pearls, silk, and condescension. She took the stand with that same cold smile she'd worn the night she handed Lena a maid's uniform wrapped like a gift. When the judge asked her why she had done it, Eleanor rolled her eyes. "It was a joke," she said with a scoff. "A lesson in humility. The girl needed it. She grew up in Queens, for heaven's sake. She didn't know how to behave in our world." A hush fell over the courtroom. But she didn't stop. She needed to understand her role. And locking her in a room, Eleanor raised a perfectly manicured hand. She was hysterical. "My son did what any husband would do. He managed her." The judge, a middle-aged woman with a steel-gray bun and zero tolerance for nonsense, took off her glasses and looked at Eleanor like she was something she'd just scraped off her shoe. "Mrs. Wren," the judge said slowly, "in this courtroom, what you're describing is not called managing. It's called abuse." And just like that, the empire of ice cracked. Halfway through the trial, I stepped out into the hallway. My heart was thudding, my nerves electric. Lena was sitting on the bench, hand on her belly, eyes closed. "You okay?" I asked, gently taking her hand. She nodded slowly. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of him." "No. Of the world. Of being a mom. Of doing this alone." And then I said something I hadn't planned. I don't even know where it came from, only that it felt true. "You're not alone. You never were. You never will be." She wept then, not in fear, but in relief. And while she wiped her tears, I want to say this to you, the one listening right now. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Now back to the courtroom. Darren lost. Not everything, no. The Wren's lawyers made sure he kept most of his financial assets. But what he couldn't keep. Lena. She got full physical custody. He was granted only supervised visits. The judge upheld the trust. The house remained Lena's, untouched, undisturbed. And Eleanor? She stormed out of court before the final ruling, her heels clicking furiously against the marble, her power slipping behind her like a torn train. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. 3 years have passed since that day. The cottage in Hudson Pines is no longer cold. It's filled with noise now, the kind of chaos that only peace makes possible. Lena runs a small editorial business from the sunroom. The place smells like cinnamon and crayons. There's a swing in the backyard that creaks happily with the breeze. And a boy. Leo. He has her red hair. My husband's kind eyes. And a laugh that sounds like sunlight. I live in the guest cottage now. The same one where Darren had once hidden like a coward. We reclaimed it. And now every night, I tuck Leo in and whisper the same thing to him that I once whispered to his mother. You are safe. You are strong. You are home. But the final surprise came from Lena herself. Something she said one evening as we sat watching Leo swing under the oak tree. A choice she made that changed our family forever. It was early evening, and the sky above Hudson Pines was caught in that perfect moment between sunset and dusk, the world dipped in gold and lavender. I was sitting on the porch swing, a mug of chamomile tea warming my hands, watching Lena push Leo on the tire swing. His little legs kicked the air, giggling every time he swung back toward her, shouting, "Higher, Mommy! Higher!" Lena laughed. Not the hollow kind she used to offer during the worst of it. This laugh was round and full, the kind that settles into your bones and stays there. She looked up and caught me watching. "You smiling at me or the baby?" she called. "Both," I said, chuckling. She walked over, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and dropped beside me on the swing. She smelled like sunshine and apple shampoo. "You know," she said, eyes scanning the land like she was seeing it all over again, "I used to hate this house." I turned to her, surprised. "Really?" She nodded slowly. During everything, the marriage, the trial, the silence, this place felt like it was part of the problem. Like it was the reason he hated me. I said nothing, just listened. Sometimes that's all someone needs. "But now," she continued, "when I look at it, I don't see a house. I see armor. I see the thing that kept me from drowning." There was a long pause. We just listened to the creak of the swing and Leo's happy voice echoing through the trees. "That was the plan," I said softly. "To give you something that couldn't be taken." She was quiet for a moment, then straightened a little, turning to me. "I'm going to change the deed." I blinked. "What?" "I'm adding Leo to the trust." I sat up, alarmed. "Lena." "And," she added, squeezing my hand, "I'm adding a clause. If Leo ever gets married, his partner gets a small portion of the land. A piece that's theirs. In their name. No conditions. No strings." I looked at her. Really looked. Gone was the girl who flinched at confrontation, who swallowed her words. Sitting next to me now was a woman. Strong. Grounded. Whole. "Why would you do that?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "So that the cycle ends here," she said. "So no one in this family ever again has to wonder if they're allowed to belong. So no one feels like they need permission to be safe." Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. And as the wind rustled through the trees, I looked out at the land, the swing set, the old apple trees, the scar on the oak where Frank had splintered the door all those years ago. Somewhere in a landfill, that ugly gray uniform was rotting in a pile of forgotten trash. Somewhere in a courthouse file, our victory was stamped and sealed. But here, on this porch, on this land, was the real legacy. We often think love means becoming one. But true love, the kind that lasts, the kind that saves you, is about making sure the other person can stand alone if they have to. I had given my daughter a house. She had turned it into a home. And now, she was turning it into a promise. One that would live on long after both of us. Leo came running up to us, breathless and red-cheeked, holding a fistful of dandelions. "For you, Nana," he said, beaming. I took them, held him close. "You're going to be just fine," I whispered into his hair. "You're growing up where the ground is steady." He didn't understand, of course. Not yet. But one day he would. Thank you for listening to this story. If it reached your heart, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if you've faced something like this, if you fought to stand your ground or help someone else find theirs, tell your story below. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories of resilience, courage, and reclaiming what was always yours.